Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
When one of my children was younger, we had a nightly ritual in which we would spray around the windows and the doors of their bedroom to keep the monsters out. We had a very special monster spray. I'm pretty sure I grabbed a nearby Windex bottle. And once the spraying was complete, my child was able to fall asleep quickly, peacefully. I remember those days with a lot of fondness, as I wish it were still so easy to spray away our fears. There are so many different things to fear these days. There's an upcoming presidential election, worries about how the results will impact our lives, our world, maybe our own relationships with other family or friends. There's so much fear relating to Israel. Every time Israel's attacked, what it means for the future of our state, Israel's responses, the safety of our friends and family living there, the tumult within Israel. As someone said to me this past week, I fear this is the beginning of a new phase in Israel's history and in the whole Middle East. We may fear climate change, the ubiquitousness of social media, the way our city is changing, whether we can walk safely in our own neighborhood. And on a more individual scale, I have a front row seat, observing the fears that parents have for their children. Of course, parents today worry about the things parents have worried about for all time. But in the last approximately 10 years or so, I've seen an increase in these fears, wrapped up in concerns about what individual opportunities will be available to them. In her book, Never Enough, Jennifer Brainey Wallace shares her research showing that parents overwhelmingly believe that their children will have fewer opportunities than they do as adults. And I get it. As a parent, I wonder, how will my children ever have the ability to buy a home in this neighborhood, send their kids to a Jewish school, pay for summer camp and kosher food? And for many parents, this worry turns into fear, with parents doing everything they can to set up their children for success. It shows up when parents argue that a different class placement would be better for their child. What's often not said in the conversation is the anxiety about how that class placement will or won't set up their child for it to be on track straight to the college of their choice. The fear shows up in a conversation with a parent who argues the child really shouldn't have to sit out from the sports game because of their grades, but what's often not shared is the fear that that child needs the athletic opportunity to be competitive in an application process for their next school. And these fears about their children's futures are impacting parent self-image. 84% of parents agree with the statement, others think that my children's academic success is a reflection on my parenting. It's no wonder that U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy recently issued an advisory on the mental well-being of parents. Over the last decade, parents have been consistently more likely to report experiencing high levels of stress compared to other adults, he writes. 33% of parents reported high levels of stress in the past month, compared to 20% of other adults. The feelings of stress, fear, anxiety can lead us to behave in ways that differ than the ways we might choose when we are totally regulated. We get into our fight or flight brain, which may look like lashing out, throwing tantrums, seeming distracted, moving around a lot, including leaving a conversation or interaction, arguing with others, unkind words or tone. And in this way, the world is not just causing us to feel that inner turmoil, it's impacting our relationships with others, it's impacting our community structures. But I'm not here to offer a sermon on parenting. Rather, I want to use this opportunity, the first Shabbat of the new year, to think about how we shift ourselves from living with these fears and anxieties about the world and about our own circumstances to living with resilience and intentionality. And Parshat Ha'azinu has some important guideposts for how to do this. Ha'azinu is written as a song or a poem. Our sources teach that Moshe used a song to complete his words, his devarim, to the people. He taught the Israelites for a month, reminding them of their journey, the mitzvot, what would happen to them when and if they stopped living the life they had been commanded. But he ended with a song. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs writes, he had to sum up his prophetic message in a way that the people would always remember and be inspired by. He knew that the best way of doing so was by music. So the last thing Moses did before giving the people his deathbed blessing was to teach them a song. Music is a powerful tool. Many of us have specific songs that can immediately transport us to a moment in our lives, to a person or a memory of importance. I recently attended a concert at which 90% of the crowd were women around my age. The group performing was very popular about 20 years ago, and we were all singing loudly and dancing joyfully, being in a moment that replicated the experiences many of us had enjoyed 20 years earlier. And music is similarly important in our tradition. Our rabbis teach that there are 10 important songs in our tradition, 9 that have been sung in the Tanakh, and 1 to be sung when the Messiah arrives. We have different nusach and trope depending on the day, the holiday, the time of day, and these melodies have an immediate power to transport us to Kol Nidre, to Tisha B'Av, to Purim. And in music, we can find one possible pathway to living a life in which we intentionally live without giving in to our fears. A foundation of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov's teaching was Azamra, I will sing. Azamra is Rabbi Nachman's teaching about the way to happiness through finding the good points in ourselves and others. Like when melodies are written, a composer needs to sift the good notes from the bad. Similarly, Rabbi Nachman teaches our job in life is to judge ourselves and others favorably by finding the good notes in the melodies of our lives. In these scenarios that may arouse fear, it's incredibly easy to fall into black and white thinking. This person is voting for a different candidate, so they must be dumb at best and evil at worst. This teacher's decision is causing my child to be upset. They must not care about children. This person behaved badly in a stressful situation. There's someone I'm going to shun from my life. But this black and white thinking, while comforting in so many ways, actually undermines our ability to live resiliently. When we think in such black and white terms, we end up retreating into a more fragile corner of the earth, where our fears actually get amplified. In their book, Both and Thinking, Wendy Smith and Marianne Lewis write that either-or thinking doesn't just compartmentalize our thinking, it also compromises our ability to make smart choices. Instead of getting caught in these traps, there are several ways we can combat this either-or thinking. Rabbi Nachman would argue that we need to look for all of the good, even when it feels incredibly challenging to find good in others. He teaches even in the case of a complete sinner, you must search until you find some good in him, some small aspect in which he is not a sinner. The practice of looking for the good fosters a sense of hope and possibility. This optimism can serve as a powerful antidote to fear, inspiring individuals to take action rather than retreating into anxiety. It's hard to be afraid of someone or be in a situation when you can find good. The more we choose to see the best in others, the more we will become the positive people we want to be, and the more resilient we will be to navigate these challenges and fears. Another way of shifting our mindset is through both and thinking. The basis of both and thinking is that multiple things can be true at the same time. Everybody has the right to their experience, regardless of what someone else is experiencing, and that you can feel more than one thing at the same time. So you can feel both grateful and resentful of the pressures of parenthood. You can feel really upset about the news and enjoy your time on a family vacation. And you can make room for multiple people's experiences. So instead of relegating a person into a compartment based on a candidate for whom they're voting, both and thinking encourages us to appreciate that individuals may hold beliefs that reflect a mix of political ideologies. In other words, one way that we can combat fears and anxieties is by actively seeking the good in others, recognizing that multiple things can be true at the same time, and leaning into the grace of our world. When we live in these open-hearted ways, we're telling fear that it cannot be our predominant emotion. And a second lesson from our parsha is around the importance of relationships, community, and holding one another accountable. It's all good to approach fear with nuanced thinking and a search for good in others, but fear can still cause us to behave in ways that don't make us feel proud. Many scientific studies indicate that one of the most important factors impacting a person's ability to be resilient in the face of fear and hardship is the quality of the relationships they have with others. So too in this parsha, we learn about the importance of community in supporting our behaviors, especially when we're afraid. Moshe begins the song with calling upon heaven and earth, and he finishes by repeating many of the themes from Devarim: following God's ways, aspire to holiness, remember that Israel made a covenant with God. In other words, we begin and end this Parsha by remembering that through collective action, we can be better people in a divine relationship with God, and that we're accountable for our choices. Even the skies and the trees are witnesses to these vows. For better and for worse, we are part of something bigger than ourselves when it comes to our actions and our behaviors. This is a theme that is explored in the musical Merrily We Roll Along, which Daniel and I had the opportunity to see this summer on Broadway. The show explores the idea that we don't see the big picture in our lives until it's too late, that ultimately we just merrily roll along, making choices that sometimes serve us in the moment, but mostly cause us and those we love pain. This theme resonated as I looked at my own behaviors and at those of many around me. I see how we roll along from fear to crisis to stress to bad news without making intentional choices about who we want to be in those moments. In the song Old Friends, the characters sing about the different kinds of friendships that support us in these hard moments. And because it's Sondheim, I'm not going to try to do it without But us old friends, what's to discuss, old friends? Tell you something. Good friends point out your lies, whereas old friends live and let live. Good friends like and advise, whereas old friends love and forgive. The lyrics have a strong distinction between those friends in our lives who hold us accountable versus the friends who are more forgiving of our mistakes. And while we do need friends in our lives who love and forgive, we also need friends who point out our lies and advise. Returning to our Parsha, Rabbi Max Chaikin writes, "We cannot always control what plagues may attack us. Our world is sometimes cruel, and it may feel like God or the world is punishing us. Yet this season and this beautiful Torah portion remind us that we become the ones who must hold each other accountable for pursuing holiness in our lives, our communities, and our society at large. We can even look to nature itself, to the trees or the ocean, the sky and the rain as witnesses to our behavior." So what is Ha'azinu teaching us about living life in a scary world? The second lesson is in thinking about those people who can hold us accountable to be our best selves. We need to rely on one another to shine light in places that are hard for us to see, to call us back from the behaviors we may show when we're acting from a place of fear. And we also need to be willing to be the person who can say to a friend, "That wasn't your best moment." But we cannot do this work. We cannot be the people who live intentionally despite all the reasons to fear unless we are truly aware. In the Parsha we read, like an eagle who rouses their nestlings gliding down to their young, so did God spread God's wings and take us, bear us along on God's pinions. While the metaphor of God bearing us on eagle's wings, lifting us out of slavery, from Pharaoh and out of constricted places is not a new one, something important here is the word ya'ir, to arouse or to wake up. Rashi teaches that this image is meant to evoke an eagle who doesn't want to scare its nestlings. So the eagle flaps its wings a few times before coming to the nest to wake up the young ones, ensure that they feel ready for the eagle's coming. Later in the passage, Rashi says an eagle carries its young on its wings rather than in its claws, because the eagle reasons if there's an arrow, better the arrow should pierce me than pierce my young. Rabbi Ben Herman teaches, like the eagle protects its young, that's the quality of love that God has for us. Torah here imagines God carrying us and keeping us safe, and also nudging us to wake up, just as the shofar's call nudges us to wake up, just as this whole season nudges us to wake up. The gift of Shabbat Shuvah is the giving of time and space to think about who we are and to focus on the act of returning to who we are meant to be. Every year we're invited to refocus, return, and get even closer to that version of ourselves. Because while the world is not going to stop throwing us reasons to be afraid, we can control how we live with those fears. It's valid to feel all the things that we feel, but our behaviors when responding from fear are not serving us. We need to use this Shabbat and these 10 days to consider how we live our lives in a scary world while facing a scary future. Do we want to continue to merrily roll along, from fear to anxiety, from worry to crisis, with unintended consequences from our behaviors on ourselves and our loved ones? Or do we want to enter this year, scary as it may be, with a commitment about how we will show up and be in those moments? And I want to offer one last idea for how we face the world right now. Yes, we need to be intentional and thoughtful. We need to look for the good, think in multiple truths. We need to rely on others to help us behave as our best selves. These steps will help us to survive what the world throws at us. But we don't want to just survive. We want to thrive. And to do that, we need to have courage. I don't mean the courage of someone who is risking their own life in service of others. I'm talking about the everyday type of courage that it takes to live a rich and meaningful, purpose-driven life. The courage of a person who confronts their friend when trust has been violated. The courage of a parent who sticks by their rules even when everyone else is doing something different. The courage of an individual to lean into a conversation about Israel with someone who disagrees. Because we can continue to put our head down and merrily roll along, or we can put our chin up and choose to move forward with courage. The word courage comes from the Latin root cor, which means to tell who you are with your whole heart. Courage is not a lack of fear. Rather, it is moving forward in spite of it. Last week, we read Moshe's words to Joshua, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and courageous. Parshat Ha'azinu has lessons to support us as we approach life with that same charge, navigating our fears and showing up as our best selves. Just as the Israelites were guided by the song of Moshe, we can find our own melodies to inspire resilience and courage. As we enter 5785, the only certainty is a promise of a world that will inspire more fears and anxieties. But in order to make this year a good one, in order to live a life that feels good for ourselves and makes our community and our world a better place, we have a responsibility to live life with an open heart, to consider complexities, to be intentional in our actions, and to foster relationships that hold us accountable. I do have faith that together we can build the world we want to see. And when all else fails, I have some monster spray I'm happy to share. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.